Hello, everyone, and a very good evening to you all. This is Shama, your host for the evening. Super excited to welcome you all to the second edition of the Product Leadership Festival, the Product Edition. With the successful completion of the first edition, the Strategy Edition, we are delighted to present to you all the Product Edition with some amazing speakers in line for you to share their thought-provoking insights and keynotes. We are on the day 4 of the Product Edition with a brilliant keynote session and many more sessions organized for you till the 22nd of May. The 10-day festival includes keynote talks, panel discussions, fireside chats, and masterclasses by renowned speakers from top tech companies around the world. So once again, folks, a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us, and let's proceed. The Product Leadership Festival is organized by the Institute of Product Leadership. And as you can see on the slide, we have the Data and Design edition in the coming months. And you have a chance to register for it right now and win exciting prizes as we progress with each edition. Please follow our LinkedIn page as in the chat window to keep yourself updated and be a part of the running contest. So folks, go ahead and register for all the editions right away. Check the chat window for the URL. Now, for those who have missed out on the strategy edition or the festival organized last year, check out the link in the chat window to watch videos of 50 plus speakers sharing their key learnings and career insights in product, data, design, and leadership. We encourage you all to share it within your friends and network and spread the knowledge. Now, before we dive into today's insightful session, let me give you a quick intro to the Institute. The Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data science, design, and strategy. The Institute has partnered with 3 universities in India and the University of Houston in the United States. The Institute was founded in 2012 with the singular mission of creating 10,000 product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to the senior working professionals to help them make career transitions into product leadership. You can find out more about the Institute and the programs offered on our website. Please check the chat window for the URL. Here's some exciting news for all the attendees tonight. You have an opportunity to win a free digital course. The best asked question in tonight's session will get this reward. Please scan the QR code on the screen to check out an array of digital courses offered by the Institute. The winner will get to pick a course of their own choice. The Institute offers new age skill courses for every step of your career. Every course is built, curated, and designed by industry practitioners. Institute of Product Leadership is glad to announce the Atal Innovation Scholarship exclusively for the participants of the festival. The scholarship worth rupees 1 lakh is extended for the EMBA in Product Leadership program offered by the Institute. This is a limited period scholarship, folks. Encourage you all to scan the QR code and talk to our program counselor right away for more details and the next steps. So once a speaker for tonight presents her insights, we'll open up for questions. Please keep the questions ready. You can ask the questions on Zoom in the Q&A section. The session is being streamed live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So viewers on any of these channels, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section and we'll share it with the speaker. Do not miss out on this opportunity, folks. Engage with our speaker with some good, intriguing questions and win a free digital course. Now, on the final day of the Product Festival, which is the 22nd of May, we have organized an open day conference. Open Conference is a platform for you all to be a speaker and share your knowledge and insights with the world. Aspiring speakers can submit their topics and the shortlisted ones will get a chance to deliver a talk for 30 minutes. Alternatively, please scan the QR code on the screen and vote for your favorite speaker and help them win. If you have missed out on this opportunity for the strategy edition, please enroll now to be a speaker and bring out the leader in you. Without further ado, coming to tonight's session, please allow me to welcome Mr. Sai Satish Vedam, the moderator of the session. Mr. Vedam is the Chief Product Officer, Senior Faculty and Executive Coach at the Institute of Product Leadership. He was most recently the Senior Director of Product Management at Oracle. Great to have you here, Mr. Vedam. Handing the session over to you now.
Thank you, Shama. Good evening, all of you. I know it's a Saturday evening, but on the other side, on the other hand, it's now becoming hard to distinguish what's a Saturday and what's a weekday. But I really do hope and wish that you all take care of yourselves, stay safe in these unprecedented and trying times that we are going through, especially people in India. So stay strong. I hope this session will give you, provide a welcome distraction from all the things that are going around and gain some actionable insights from our speakers across the world, and take it and apply it in your professional careers. So with that, before I introduce today's keynote speaker, we have a superbly qualified speaker with us, Penny Townsend. Penny, if you can just turn on your camera and say hello so that we know that we can see you and hear you, and then we can proceed further.
Hi, I think my video is already on.
Great. Yes, we can see you now and hear you loud and clear. Thank you for joining in the early morning, Penny. I know it's quite early for you where you are. Before I introduce you to the audience, just a quick housekeeping aspect so that we make this session as effective as possible. As Shama explained, the event is streamed live on various platforms. For those of you who are joining on Zoom webinar here, we do encourage to ask questions, relevant questions for the topic to Penny, and please do so in the Q&A box here instead of the chat window. The chat window can get pretty cluttered, so I encourage all of you to use the Q&A. If you're joining us on LinkedIn Live, feel free to ask your questions in the thread, in the respective thread. There's a team that is monitoring this, and I'll pick up the questions after Penny provides her perspectives and insights, and we'll have a discussion around it. Again, it is my pleasure to welcome Penny Townsend to this talk. Penny is at present a co-founder and the chief product officer at QualPay. QualPay is essentially trying to make payments, digital payments, easy, multi-channel for whichever way that the businesses wants to collect payments. Penny comes with 20 plus years of experience, executive experience in payments industry. She's had an incredible journey from program manager to business manager to product manager into marketing, and of course working with engineering teams, design teams in building products, and has had leadership roles at PayPal, VeriSign, and other companies. Penny is also very passionate about empowering women and minorities in the payment industry, and also, of course, in product management. That is something also, Penny, we share commonly with IPL. IPL is quite focused on and helping women get into product roles, transition their careers into product management, and provide the necessary support guidance wherever they can. With that, over to you, Penny, and again, welcome to the session. Right, and after your session, we'll bring in some Q&A from the audience, and we'll discuss that. Let's take it away.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have been invited to come talk to you, and I am very passionate about product management. I've been in product management for over 20 years, so I'm very happy to share my ideas that I've developed over that time period. And just give me 1 second while I get my presentation going. Things look different when you share it. Okay. So I wanted to talk to you and share with you my ideas that I've had and a playbook I've created over time with working with engineers and designers throughout my career. And I want to start off with a tiny little bit of a story that might not seem entirely relevant now after I've spent a year and a half in the house with my husband. But a couple of years ago, we were crossing each other like ships in the night. We barely saw each other. And so I had this great idea of going kayaking. And I think when we first met, my husband and I were super active people. And I was convinced that kayaking would be fairly simple for us to achieve. So we woke up one morning at the weekend super early, and I was very excited. And we got there. We got to the water, we had a tiny little bit of training given to us, and then we were off kayaking. And I'll just draw your attention to the picture and where our oars are in the water. And I have to tell you, it was a complete and utter disaster. We did struggle going anywhere. We ended up going around in circles. And when we progressed from circles, we paddled in so much water into the kayak that sinking became a great possibility. And afterwards, because I thought I should do a lot of thinking and a lot of digesting of what happened, I did reflect also on my product career, and I did realize that this experience was quite an adept metaphor for product management and working with designers and engineers. The same issue of struggling with going anywhere, going in circles, and reaching our end goal without sinking or some other kind of disaster, I have actually seen many times in my career. And by the way, I did tell my husband that we were very lucky that this wasn't our first date, because there would not have ever been a second date. So how do you build a cohesive team when you're basically coming up at everything from different positions? And during my career, I've used 3 key practices, and they are SOS. So the first one is getting your whole team in sync. The second is orientating in the correct or right direction. And then the third is avoid sinking. So let's walk through these practices by looking at the problems they help resolve, and then what habits you can use to bring these practices alive. So at the beginning of the kayak trip, we were going nowhere. We had the equipment, we had the vision, and again, we had a tiny little bit of training, but we weren't working together, and we needed to get in sync, and the oars needed to be in sync. So let's take a look at the first practice. And the barriers to getting in sync between engineering designers and the product team and even the customers are reflected in this very popular used tree swing analogy. The outcome is that the customer doesn't receive the product they needed. The process is very similar to the game of telephone that you may or may not have played when you were a child, where every time information is passed from one person to the next, it actually changes and morphs a tiny little bit. So the customer asked for a 3-step swing, and then the product person explained a plain swing with just one step. And then when the designer heard it, the designer designed it to be very safe, so designed the swing to be on the floor. And then the engineer gets hold of what needs to get done, and he or she creates this really cool looking tree swing. And what was delivered to the customer wasn't actually, number one, what they asked for, but actually number two, probably more importantly, it wasn't what the customer really needed. So everyone here is talking the same language as such, but meaning and understanding is different. And then you throw in other language barriers that happen between countries when you're dealing with international teams, and the issue just becomes larger. My husband and I had received exactly the same information when we got into that kayak, and we had different tasks. I was in the front, he was in the back, and we were just definitely not in sync. So how do you get in sync? And I'd like to give you a little example from very early day on in my career in 2005. And I was working at PayPal. And when I got to PayPal, I was given the task of integrating the company that I came from and their products into PayPal's products. And I was given the task of doing the integration within 3 months of hitting the floor on PayPal and getting it into production. And at the time at PayPal, their typical cadence for a release was every 9 months. And so, number one, I was given a job of the integration, which seemed pretty hard mountain to climb. But second thing is that I was being asked to change the culture of the people that I was working with and get them to release something within 3 months. So what I first did was I met with the product team at PayPal that was responsible for all of the pieces I was integrating with. And there was about 14 product people in the room with the one, me. And we got to hear how the whole product work at PayPal, and PayPal had split each of the experiences into like minute pieces. And so it was hard to get everybody to see the bigger picture. But I talked to everybody, and from there I went to talk with the engineering team, and I talked to the designers, and I had an opportunity to talk to some customers as well. So I did my research, which is the first thing about getting in sync, is that you need to make sure that you understand the entire picture that you are talking about. And then next, you can really craft out what your objectives and goals are for delivering the product. And I knew the high goal, which was to integrate, but I just didn't know some of the more intricate details about how everything was going to come together. Next, I created a proposal for the product or solution and went around the teams again, brought them together, and presented exactly what I thought that the plan should be. And it had been evolved and it been iterating every time I've been talking to people. So when people came into the room, they already knew what I was going to say, but all the team members were hearing it at exactly the same time. I then took the lead, and then perhaps more importantly, being the driver. And I am a true believer that you can speak words in a room or on Zoom or however you're talking to people, and you feel like you've led people, but you need to drive them once you leave the room, because when you leave the room or leave Zoom, everybody starts to like other thoughts come into play. Other conflicts might come in. And so people tend to like wander off the path that you set for them. And so next comes my practice that really helps to keep people in sync. Obsessively communicate. So this habit I used with this particular team, and I took time to meet with each of the team members, and I met with their managers, and I also met with anybody else that was working for them. And it was partly because I had this really short time period, and I was changing the culture within the company to speed everybody up from this 9 months to 3 months. And every time I would meet somebody, they would tell me, no, it's not possible. And I would say, look, let's just figure out how we can make this happen. And so I constantly circled around all the team members to make sure that we were staying on track. And I would meet them in the buildings that they were at. I would walk around to find people. I'd meet them at the gym. I'd find them at their cars. And it might sound quite obsessive, but it was a way to really make sure that we met that 3-month time frame that we had. So let's come to the second habit. So it's just not enough to take the lead and then also clearly communicate where you're going. For you to have respect when you're talking to people and for them to really lead you, you need to have one very important element, and that is to be the voice of the customer. And the only way I know of being the voice of the customer is taking the time to actually listen to what the customer needs and know their problems and be the expert and be the person that really lobbies and has empathy for what they are doing. And when you use this, I find in my entire career, when you get into discussions and quite vigorous like arguments maybe, when you come and speak from the voice of the customer, you may not be answering the argument at hand, but you're drawing everybody back to the problem that you're trying to solve, and you're drawing people in to ask them to solve it with you. Sorry, excuse me. And so being the voice of the customer really builds this respect, helps to build respect for you, but also allows like any arguments that you have to really dissolve and stay focused. And it also helps you as a product manager stay focused on what's important rather than what you might be attaching yourself to. So coming back to the kayaking trip, we had I had taken the lead because I was sitting in the front, and we got our oars in the water, but we happened to put them on opposite sides. So when we began, we started going around in circles. So why is it not enough just to lead, to set the objectives, to work with the teams, and then to keep them in sync? Do you think that gets you to the end goal? Because it never has for me, and probably if you think about your own experiences, probably not for you either. So let's answer why this problem exists. So I'm going to move on to the second practice and look at orienting people in the right direction. And the reason why it's hard to make sure that people are staying in the right direction is really the impact of the perceptions and values that each of the team members brings to the table every time you meet or every time you're working together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about an ancient elephant story. And elephants are one of my favorite animals, and to really demonstrate to you how these come into play. And so there once was an elephant that appeared in a village, and the villagers had never seen, heard, or interacted with the elephant before. And they sent out a team of 4 blind people, and I'm not sure why they were blind and they didn't send anybody that could see, but maybe it was because they weren't sure whether it was a lion that might eat them. So we got the first person, and the first person goes ahead and feels the trunk, and it's the designer, and the designer says, "It's a snake." And then you have the engineer who feels the ears of the elephant and thinks that it's a leaf. And then you have the customer who's feeling the tail and thinks that it is a rope. And then you have the product person that's touching and interacting with the legs and thinks that it's a tree. The story highlights that our version of reality is very much based upon our own values and perception, but also where we appear in the story. So each person was in a different point in this story, and so they all had a very different experience. The perception and values of engineers, designers, product managers, and customers perpetuates this idea that we actually all talk a different language. But in reality, we can orientate in the same direction even when we have different values. So I want to take a moment to look at the different values that a designer and an engineer have. And this is from me speaking to different designers and engineers over time and some of my ideas. And I would suggest that after you leave today, you think about the different values that perhaps you bring to the table and how that makes you be a little bit different in terms of your perception from an engineer and a designer. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of them. So the designer believes strongly that design matters and will improve the bottom line. The engineer believes code is to be developed for simplicity and repeatability. Let's take a look at another one. The designer has a passion for being creative and thinking in new and different ways. And the engineer has a passion for writing clean and efficient code. And this one is totally all came from me, and it's my perception. The designers love to make things designy and aesthetically appealing and beautiful. And engineers love to use the latest technology to support their code. These values are at odds with each other as you look at them on the screen, and they create this very natural friction between team members. And these friction points get overemphasized where a designer and engineer sit in the story, or where you may have them in the way that you're developing the product. So let me move on and look at the next habit. So the next habit is to investigate, and while you're doing so, you need to understand both the need and the why. So let's visit another story from my past to look at the why. And so I was working at a company called Merchant Solutions, and you'll note that there's a theme to my entire career, which is it's all been in payments. And while I was at this company, we were developing what we called our backend, which would allow us to connect directly to Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express, and cut out a third party. And to do so with credit card processing, you're basically cutting out the middleman, but you're also needing to reconcile the money that's coming into your bank account. I worked with the finance team that we had, and every day they sat and they did a job and they looked at screens on the third party, and they were green screens. And yes, they're still available today and people still use them. They were using them, but it took our accountant a full day to go through each of the screens and take a screenshot of every screen to do what they were doing. And so I spent time really saying, why do you want what you want? And I started to peel back the onion of what was wanted to find out what was needed and then why. And the why here was that the daily settlement that happened had to prove out to the bank wire. So all the transactions that got processed had to match exactly what got deposited into the bank. And then in addition, because we were responsible for funding merchants, we also had to make sure that the daily debits, number one, that they happened, number two, that they were correct and actually fitted to what was expected for them to be. And then we had to make sure it was auditable. So on the green screens, if you didn't look on a single day, and so let's just say it's Monday, and you didn't do your job of auditing what happened, by the time you got to Tuesday, you could never get back to Monday, which was why everything was getting printed, because you could never get back to that particular day. So now I knew the why. And so it became a little bit easier for me to craft out the need. And again, this is not what the finance person wanted. I was trying to find out what they actually needed. And what they needed was a view of daily settlement and the daily debits to do a proof of the money movement that was happening in the bank. And it was multi-millions of dollars. So it was big numbers that were moving. And that every day needed to be a snapshot. So if I was trying to look at last year from today's perspective, that day last year should look exactly the same as it looked when I looked at it on that particular day. So it wouldn't change and it was frozen. So now I was ready to practice the next habit, which was passionately storytelling. So the investigator habit enabled me to passionately storytell to the designers and the engineers, and I built the picture of the whole story. And I didn't exactly know the intricate details of what needed to happen, but I brought the team in together so we could understand all the use cases and really define how we wanted to address what we needed to do. So well-crafted stories and use cases help provide the vision to see the entire elephant in the elephant story, and the use cases to build the necessary parts, orientating us all in the same direction. So let's look into the third practice. And my third practice is don't sync. So we are now in sync. We are orientated in the right direction. And now what we have to do is avoid calling SOS by using the final S, don't sink. My husband and I were rowing mostly together, going in the right direction, but there was still something wrong. And we unfortunately paddled so much water into the kayak that sinking became this great possibility. And when I think about it and compare it to product development, I think about this as QA. And QA is something that you just have to get right so you can avoid sinking. So let's look at the final habit that helps us avoid delivering unusable products as well as buggy products. And it isn't just technology. You need to be using more than technology. So how to avoid sinking? So I'm going to take you way back to my very early day career. And it was at VeriSign, and it was the company that got bought by PayPal, and VeriSign had also bought us from another small startup. So we were a tiny payment gateway. We were once again switching transactions and moving money, and we were developing code, rolling out, and I think our rollout period was like 10 or 11 months, and we spent about a month in QA before we released. And we released a couple of times, and we caused outages for customers. And for the customers and what we did, it was imperative that we didn't do what we were doing, because every second costs people hundreds to thousands of dollars in lost sales, where people would, if they couldn't process the transaction, you would walk away and perhaps not buy it. And everybody's probably had this experience of trying to check out when they haven't been able to buy what they wanted to buy on one site, and you just simply go to another site to buy what you want to get. And so it was devastating, both for the brand of the customer, but also for us, because it obviously caused a lot of escalations. And the whole team I was with got threatened several times with losing our jobs, and unless we could figure out what we were doing. And so the one thing that I did, because I was the product lead for what was being rolled out, is I brought the entire team together, and it was composed of project managers, it was engineers, it was designers, it was documentation people, and it was the QA team. And the first thing I was doing is I was using my passionate storytelling to make sure that everybody could see the elephant, so they all knew how the whole thing came together. Because what became more apparent is that when people were coding, they would test their little piece of the code, but nobody was actually doing the full on 360-degree view of how does it all come together, and how does the customer actually, how are they going to experience it? And it was a little hard, because it's payments, and when you're in a test environment, it's hard to completely test how the customer will experience what you have. But it was super important, because of all the issues that we had, to really try and create this experience. So we were testing exactly like the customer. So now we come to the next point. And perhaps before I leave this, it did have a little of a happy story, because the whole change that we did, we were able to release, and we did get to avoid releasing things that took customers down. And I have to say, the other practice that we actually used is that if you were the product lead for the release, you would stay with the release, and which meant that I stayed at work for over 48 hours once when I was monitoring a release to make sure it got out okay. And it was the expectation of the whole team. They were the fun days of early tech companies. So let's look at the next habit that you can use, and it's QAing the shit out of it. So you need to make sure that you are not quite trusting everything. You need to be trusting, but verifying what you have. And always, as a product manager, you are responsible for testing the features that you have actually requested, and that it actually works the way that you thought that it should work. So to conclude, all of us want to make what we do count and matter beyond making money. Making money is like the lowest level on Maslow's hierarchy of needs that you want to feel comfortable with, but you want to know that what you do actually counts. And what I have found in my entire career, that if you get everybody in sync through obsessively communicating and being the voice of the customer, and you orientate everyone in the right direction through investigating, making sure that you understand the need, not the want, and you use passionate storytelling with your entire team, and you then practice avoid thinking by QAing the shit out of it, that you will start to make big differences in how you roll out code, but also how you interact with the customer. And I have honestly gained the benefit to successfully rolling out many different types of products and supported many products in the payment space by using these practices. And of course, it's not till hindsight do I look back in my career, do I see that these were the practices that I learned to use, and these were the habits that I was using to bring the practices alive. So let's go back to the kayaking. So just in case anybody's worried out there, my husband and I are still together. And if we'd had the opportunity to take advantage of SOS at the beginning of the kayak trip, it definitely would have gone a lot better. So I invite you today for you to use SOS and these 5 habits that I've talked through. Make it your own, because the only way to bring things alive truly in your career and in your lives is really adding a little bit of yourself to everything that you're doing. And then just see how you can create cohesive teams and ignite your effectiveness, making what you do count and matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. That was, as one of the participants rightly said, amazing storytelling, non-linear screenplay, possibly what Quentin Tarantino would do almost. Right. So thanks for that. So there are a few questions that we're getting in. Before we get into that, I think I thought we could just do a really quick poll to see whether we have majority of them engineers or designers or product managers. And then we'll start taking the questions so that you can also structure the responses accordingly, right? So let's do a really quick poll. First one is, where do you come from? What kind of role and do you have today? Title, essentially, right? And again, there are lots of creative titles, especially in this country. But do take some time and answer and tell us what role do you play, whether you come from products, product management, engineering, or project management, any of these. So that'll help us focus more on the questions that we want to bring in accordingly. Super. So I only see about 57, 60% folks voted. Rest, I suppose, may be joining from mobile phone, which is kind of a bummer on Zoom on mobile. Right? But thanks for doing that. Can we bring the next question as well? No. So this is yes. Now, clearly, everybody understands if you're in a product role, stakeholder management is absolutely key, and there are so many stakeholders. And where do you spend most of your time? Which stakeholder do you spend most time managing, right? So often teams spend time not just with their management, but outbound teams like marketing, sales. It looks like, unsurprisingly for this particular event or session, engineering teams, managing engineering teams or working with engineering teams is clearly where most of this time is spent. Super. Thank you again. Last and final poll, again, help us better understand this. Which of these areas do you feel the need that you would need to do more work or learn more about how to do it, right? So where are you novice in right now? Please stay factual. It's easy to get into an aspirational mode in such kind of questions and help us know the reality. Penny, I hope you're able to see the poll results as they happen, right? So some of them are certainly interesting results. Ability to sell your ideas to peers and executives. I think you've touched upon some of the aspects of it. Passionate storytelling, using the why, focusing on the why aspect of it leads to that. Excellent. Thank you guys for that. And please keep the questions coming in while I start taking the ones that are already there. So I love the way that you structured this, Penny. SOS, easy to remember, in sync, orienting in the right direction, and don't sync, right? So, and fantastic 5 habits. I think everyone should inculcate, every leader, not just a product leader, but I suppose, obsessively communicate, voice of the customer, all these habits, investigate, everything is very relevant and needed for every product leader. And also the perspectives and values that designers and engineers have, right? And you also talked about a friction and this is a point of contention for many, right? Especially for people who spend time in managing products and when you're working with a cross-functional team and mostly with the engineering team, designers and QA team, there is supposed to be a healthy tension, but it can quickly get escalated into a war of egos and blame games and all of that stuff. So while collaboration, communication, and inclusion are all absolutely essential, should the product leader seek to get a consensus or a mandate to lead in a particular direction and corral people around that?
Yeah, I personally don't like the idea of the mandated direction, because you want people to be inspired to go in the direction you want them to go, and when you mandate something, it's just you got people pulling the wrong way. And so when I've been in a room, it's important to let people do the job that they are trained to do. So it's important to enable the designer to be the designer, and for the engineer to be the engineer, and for the product person not to bring their ego into the room and go, well, this is the way I wanted it to work. And so I think it's just, you have to be super careful. And I think that in 20 years, I have never not managed to get consensus in a room to move forward. So there are ways to get it done. And I have walked into rooms where it's been very conflictual walking in. It's just finding those little recipes, diffusing situations, making sure that you're always focused on the customer and the right thing, and not on, like, don't get lost in some of the weeds. Always bring it up to the level and remind people what you're doing. And when you do that, it may not be actually what you had in your head and you had this vision for, but because teams have this, there is this amazing power in teams that you get something better than what you possibly even thought at the beginning. And you just have to relax and let that whole process take you somewhere different. And I think, early day in my career, it's like you start off when you're very young and you're trying to control every aspect, and then you suddenly wake up and you realize that the pieces that you have to control is really enabling people rather than trying to control the entire experience. And so it takes some time, but you have to trust it a little bit in the whole process of how a team works together.
Super. I think there was also a question asked by Akila. Vatsalya asked, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in working with the engineering team, and how did you overcome it? I'm sure there are many, but there's something that you can pick and help understand.
Yeah, I think that probably a technique that I've experienced, I've done a lot of work with integration, so working with other companies, integrating into the technology that we had. And one of the things that I've experienced is that, and I'm sorry if you're an engineer and you're on this call, but going into the room with the arrogancy that I'm not going to understand what you're talking about, and talking to me like I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's a really hard thing to deal with. And I've been in situations where I have walked into a room, let's just say there was 8 people in the room. The CEO of the company is in with me. He's done the introduction to introduce me and said, this is the main person you're going to be working with to do the integration. And nobody in the room will talk to me or look at me. And then they use complete jargon. And that's probably one of the hardest experiences that I had, because it's a little because I was the only woman in the room. And so I'm facing it. Is it because I'm a woman, or is it because I'm in product, or is it I don't know what the reasons were. And it takes time, and you have to be confident in yourself to kind of break those pieces down. And so when people use what I will call jargon, I will be, do you mind explaining that to me? Do you mind explaining it to me so I can understand it? And if they still don't, and you can just say, can you go draw it on the board for me so I can understand it? Or show me a picture, because I'm a very visual person and a picture can help bring it together. But it also gets the person to start talking to me in the language in which I can digest, and starts to break down those little barriers. But it's that to me was probably one of my worst moments I ever had walking into the room. So there are ways around it. We ended up all becoming friends at the end. So
Great.
just takes time.
Yeah. So Abhi and Arpit asked a very similar question. You said, in sync, do research, define objectives and goals, and also talked about, some very important habits. Is there a test, or is there a check that you do with these teams, and what is it to make sure that they are in sync?
Well, that's part of me obsessively communicating. So perhaps, part of communication is a conversation. And so it's using my listening skills. So, when I'm talking to people, I'm not coming them straight at, well, tell me what's going on. I'm actually having a conversation, letting them talk about it. And then I'm guiding a discussion to find out whether we're actually heading in the right direction, rather than just asking direct. And this method of communication takes time. And sometimes, you're under such a time crunch that you think you don't have time to do it. And I had this really short 3 month time period. And I was like, how am I going to make it work? And so although I was short on time, I spent the time to get to know the people, because number one, getting to know people, you just communicate better. They know who you are and you get to know them better. And number two, if you feel like they're veering off course, because you will find it out when you're talking to them, and you'll see it in the delivering of the results as well, that you get to do a little bit of course correction. And the PayPal product that I did had this intrinsic problem that people kept escalating up to their senior managers and saying, I'm not doing it this way. It's just not the way we're doing it. And so I was constantly having to undo and repair, and to keep us going. And you talked a little bit about a mandate. So probably in that circumstance, I said we have a mandate, and the mandate is that we deliver within 3 months. And I kept repeating it, but then I'm also kept saying, and we can do it. This is totally possible. And I would lay out how to do it. And so, trying all those communication techniques that we all learn.
Great. So it's a two-part question. I think, again, looks like coming in more from influence without authority perspective, right? So if the engineering and QA teams weren't reporting to you, which is often the case, right? They have their own teams and managers and hierarchy reporting structure. How would you influence them in the context, for example, especially if you don't have much experience either in engineering or design?
So I will draw you back to the concept of the voice of the customer. And I think that's one thing that you bring to the table that they don't have. They haven't sat with the customer. They don't know what they want. And obviously it's different. I've dealt with business to business products, not business to consumer products, but the same thing can really be said that you become an expert at something. Like, you're not going to ever be an expert engineer, and you're never going to be an expert designer, but you're an expert in what the customer wants. And this is how you start, in my opinion, this is how you start to build the respect without having ownership. And I have never owned an engineering team or a designing team. I've only ever had product managers. And when I think about it, and specifically when I hire, there's a couple of things typically when I'm hiring people I'm looking for. Number one, entrepreneurship, because I want to know that they like this concept of running a mini business, because that's what product management really is. And number two, I want to make sure that they understand the role as being a role of diplomacy. Like, you are going in there to be a diplomat. You don't get to take your own ego with you. You're actually taking the voices of many to bring it together to build something. And you're not doing it on your own. You can't do it on your own. And product management, I think, is one of the hardest jobs because you influence without actually having anybody reporting to you. Because I can tell you it's really easy to do things when people report to you, because they do have that, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do what she's asking. But influencing and getting things done is a lot harder, but it's actually a lot more powerful, because you tend to find that people will do more of what is right. And sometimes when people work for you, you want them to have their own voice. So you've got to find your own voice, and you've got to have the voice of the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Siddiqui and Prabhat, for asking that. And follow-up thing on the same thing, Penny, which Ashish is asking is, voice of customer. Absolutely, you are, let's say, the voice of the customer as a product manager, even though you're not an expert in engineering or design, but having a good understanding of the design skills and the engineering principles and engineering skills, would you think that it contributes that conversation more and makes things a lot more easier to facilitate that?
I think that I would tell you to color in your own sandbox. Like, just, it's good to understand. So I do have quite a lot of understanding of technology and coding, but when I go into a room, people meet me as me, and I'm not bringing what skill sets that I have, because I'm letting the person be the expert. And it's helpful, because I in my experience, engineers try to play me and say that things are going to take 10 times as long as what it's going to do so. And I get to go in the room and I actually know the truth of how long things are, like, approximately are going to take. But instead of me coming into conflict either with the designer or the engineer, I'm going to use a different method, and I'll be like, well, can you draw that on the board for me? Let's just break it down. Let's see if we can speed things up. And so I'll be using different words to try and lead them somewhere. Definitely helps.
As opposed to taking an approach, I don't agree with you, because I also know what you're talking about, and it's not going to take that much time as you're saying, right? So what you're essentially articulating is, agree and acknowledge that the engineering team is the experts in engineering, and designers are the experts. It's good to know that. It's good to have that vocabulary and understanding of it, so that you can have that conversation in difficult circumstances in a different way, as opposed to not knowing anything, right? And which makes that alignment much more easier than if you had not known anything about it, right? So great. Now, Prashant asked again a series of questions, so we'll only have time for one or two more. Prashant asked, according to you, what skills are important to work in this context? Are these technical skills, product skills, or what are the soft skills that you would recommend people to have?
I think having a good conflict management experience, and not to be afraid of conflict, because conflict is a very good power to really get people to evolve and do better. And I think that I just talked about it, is like, I don't go in there and I'm not forcing people into positions. I'm bringing them into collaboration so they can come together and build. So, one of the softer skills when I hire is I'm looking for people that can do that, and they're not afraid of conflict, and that they can have the right conversations to draw people together. And it's a hard one, and I look for that more than I look for any other skill.
It's funny how any discussion about products and product management, when engineering and designer are involved, the conversation or the discussion quickly devolves into conflicts, right? And how do you deal with this conflict? Just like what we are going through here, right? So a lot of questions about how do you know I should trust the engineering team? How do you know I should trust the design? So I think it's a real issue in teams, and taking a much more nuanced approach, an approach that acknowledging that they are the experts, and then of course having using their vocabulary, trying to help them understand that you actually know what you're talking about, or you know what they are talking about, is going to be important. So bridging, I think building bridges and
Mm-hmm.
burning silos is what I would summarize
Yeah.
this as,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And I'm a true believer in you have to trust,
Yeah.
but verify. And that verify part always comes in that QA, the end part. And so that's why you have as a product manager, you have quite a lot of control, because you're usually the one that says, I'm ready to take this to production. I'm ready for it to be delivered to the customer. And that's where you can hold people accountable if things have shifted along the way.
Yeah.
So you have your moment in the sunshine, and that is that moment. Like that's where if you need to like really lay it down, that's where I would be.
Absolutely.
Bringing people
Well,
together.
I think thank you so much. That's all we have time for on the questions part. But one request from us, Penny, for the folks who have posed these questions and we couldn't get to it, if they can reach out to you, and whenever you find some time, if you help them, address that or give them some guidance on that, that'll appreciate it, right? So,
Absolutely.
Is LinkedIn the best way to contact
Yes,
you? Okay.
that would be great.
Great, super. So again, incredible session. So just don't go away, Penny, for a couple of minutes before, let me wrap up these announcements. So congratulations to Vatsalya for a great question, which actually spurred a lot of other questions from many people. Please reach out to the team after the session for your free digital learning course, and you'll get access to that. There is a leaderboard. It's kind of a game where many of you are joining these sessions and finding it useful. Feel free to go and invite your friends and colleagues and ask them to join the subsequent sessions that are there. And as you do that, you gain points and you'll be on top of the leaderboard. And for the folks who are on the leaderboard, there are some very interesting giveaways, including signed books from the authors from the Faculty of Institute of Product Leadership, Amazon gift vouchers, and credits on the digital learning as well, right? The next couple of ones quickly. One of the important reasons why this festival is hosted and conducted is to build and nurture a product community in this country. There's already a very strong, thriving community of 1,600 people. So feel free to scan the QR code here with your mobile phone, or go to community.productleadersforum.org, or where you'll find amazing resources, sharing of content, discussions, right from product managers to C-level executives there. So the whole idea is to bring the community together and nurture it. The next one is one of my favorites, and really encourage all of you to take a quick survey. It's going to take about 10 minutes, and the survey is essentially to establish a baseline study of the state of product management in India, right? And interesting.today/benchmark study is the URL, or scan the QR code. If you take that survey, when the survey is complete, you will get your own copy of it, which will include very interesting insights in terms of the salary levels of various product management levels, the day in the life of the product manager, where they spend most of their time, and hiring managers, what are they looking for, what kind of skills and mindsets are they looking for to hire into product roles, right? So do take some time and take that. With that, thank you so much, Penny. Please accept a small digital certificate as a token of appreciation for taking the time and sharing your perspectives and insights, right? Thank you so much, and have a good day. So, folks, don't miss an incredible session tomorrow. An amazing leader, who doesn't know Raj Yavatkar, Chief Technology Officer of Juniper Networks. He led Google Cloud Networking until recently. So, a fireside chat between Raj and me tomorrow. So, do join in. And until then, I'll see you tomorrow. Over to you, Shama. Thank you.
Thank you, Benny, for that insightful session. And thank you, Sai Satish, for facilitating the session. And audience, great Q&A. We love the enthusiasm. We request you all to share a few seconds of yours to share your feedback and let us know about the session that you had. Your feedback would be really constructive, and it will help us make improvements for the next round of the festival. So I hope you can see the poll on the screen. Please take the poll and let us know. Thank you once again, audience, for joining in. And I hope to see you all tomorrow at 8 p.m. with yet another insightful session. Like Sai Satish mentioned, tomorrow is going to be an exciting fireside chat. Do not miss out on that art floor. Thank you for your participation, audience. With that note, I end tonight's session. Happy learning and stay skilled. Have a great night.